friends, I am Sarah. Welcome back to my channel, Sunset Bow Tarot. So today is day 2 of my compressed 31 days of tarot. Here we go. Day 4, question 4, your 5 most used decks from 2010 to 2019. So this is a decade worth of decks. And I'm pretty sure these are the ones I've used the most. It's really hard to say. I kind of had to like look at my collection and say, okay, you know, there are decks that I've had longer than other decks, so I've definitely used them more because I've had them for longer. Even though they're maybe not now my top 5 most used. But so there are some of these decks that are just kind of like from earlier in my collection, and because of that, I've used them more. So I actually started reading tarot in 2013. So I've been reading for a long time, and I didn't actually start really getting more decks in earnest until like into the 2010s. So, you know, for my first like 10 years of reading tarot, I did not have that many decks. And so those decks are kind of on this list because, you know, they're the ones that I had. So I use them all the time. So the first deck that I would say is on my most used is my good old Robinwood Tarot. This is the deck that I really learned to read tarot on. It was my primary deck for a very long time. And I still used it quite a lot well into the 2010s, despite the fact that I don't read with it at all anymore, ever. But it was a great learning deck, and I don't know, it's always just spoken to me very clearly, even though I think the artwork is beautiful, but it's just like not my favorite. But it was a great deck to learn on. And yeah, I don't know, it's still special to me. I'm still always going to keep this copy of it. You know, I just read with it so much for so long, and I read for so many people with it, and I don't know, it's just, it's a special deck to me. So yeah, I do, well, with the exception of this freaking Wheel of Fortune card, which I don't like at all, the Robinwood is a special deck to me. So, so yeah, I used it as my primary deck for so long that I feel like it's got to go on my top 5 list, because I am pretty sure that I was still using it all the time into the 2010s, because I only had like a few other decks at the beginning of this decade. So another deck that is on my top most used of 2010 to 2019 for a similar reason is the Golden Tarot by Cat Black. And I kind of credit this deck with bringing me out of a bit of a slump in my tarot reading that I went through in kind of the mid 2000s, like not this decade, but the decade before. It was kind of the first time I realized that there could be a deck that used this kind of classic artwork, and I should start showing some cards, but that used this kind of classic artwork and really, you know, could have a kind of a unique sort of like collage style approach to the artwork. And so this was a very special one to me. And again, I don't use it quite as much anymore. I feel like I should use it more because I do still love it. I love the artwork of it, and I think it's an absolutely wonderful deck. But I did use this one quite a lot in earlier days because again, I've had it for longer than I've had a lot of my other decks. So, so yeah, this is the Golden Tarot by Cat Black. And it's, again, digital collage, all medieval style artwork. We're about to get to my #1 top deck of all time, which is also a Cat Black deck. I freaking love Cat Black's work. You guys have all heard me talk about this deck. You've heard me mention this deck like a kabillion times. And that deck is the Touchstone Tarot. This is my soul deck. This is my #1 deck of all time. I love it so much. Again, you know, I got this deck later than when I got the Golden Tarot, but as far as decks go, this is my ride or die #1. So I've used this a ton. And it's so special to me. Here at the back, it's got gilded edges. Mine are quite nicked up at this point. Again, this is a cat black deck. It's digital collage. And it's a super special one. It's out of print now, but I believe US Games is bringing it back this year, which is so awesome. And this deck is just super personal to me, and I love it with all my heart. And I've talked about the reasons for that a lot previously, so I probably shouldn't go into it again, but yeah, I use this guy all the time. It's just I don't know, it's got a special voice. It feels like my very take no shit friend, and I don't know, it's always there for me. It's a special one, and I'm so happy US Games is bringing it back, because the fact that it was out of print for so long is a freaking tragedy. We'll also talk about the Morgan Greer Tarot. I have the Morgan Greer Tarot in a tin. This has got to go on my most used, just because I carry this deck around with me basically everywhere all the time. It's a travel deck that I pretty much always have with me. So I read for other people with this deck all the time. Like if there's an impromptu reading that happens, I'm 90% of the time, this is the deck I'm going to be using, because I just always have it with me. And whoops, here are the backs, as though anybody doesn't know what the backs of the Morgan Greer look like. And it just is such a good reader. It's just it's a solid classic deck that will always read well, and that, you know, it's a workhorse, and I use it all the time. So, so yeah, this is definitely got to go on my most used of the decade. And it's a really great deck. The Morgan Greer. I mean, I feel like everybody should have a copy of the Morgan Greer. Like, unless, you know, the artwork doesn't speak to you. Like, it's like a classic deck. And it's a great reader if you know, read Rider-Waite-Smith. It has a cool feel to it. But it just always, I don't know, it always works. Like, it just always works. And so finally, I had a hard time figuring out what to say for the 5th most used deck, because, you know, I was just like thinking about like what I had in my collection for longer, but then what I'd used more. And I came to the conclusion that even though I got this deck, I think I only got this deck 2 years ago. I've used the shit out of it since I got it. And so I put it on the list, although I could be wrong. This might not be one of my most used, but I've used it so much since I got it that I was just inclined to put it on the list. And that is the Anna K Tarot. And this is my indie edition. I actually also have a mass market edition, which I've trimmed, which I also use quite a lot, because if I'm going to take this deck out of the house, I will take my mass market edition, because the indie edition is too special. But this deck is such a good reader. This is another one where it's like, I think that there are a lot of people who look at this deck and they think, oh, you know, the faces are kind of weird looking, and I don't know. But like, as a beginner deck, this deck's amazing, because you don't need to know anything esoteric at all to read this. Everything is conveyed with emotion, and it's super, super talkative. I mean, even cards like this, like the sun card, the sun and the moon and star cards are all just like this, where, you know, it just puts you in a place, you know, and then you feel the feeling that you would feel if you were actually in that place. And it conveys so much. So I think that this deck is honestly just such an easy reader. It also, to be honest, has some of the best aces and courts that I've ever seen in a deck, in terms of, again, helping to really grasp the meaning of those cards. So, so as a beginner deck, like, this is absolutely would have to be one of my top choices for anybody. I think this is a wonderful deck. And like I said, I use the shit out of it. I use it for other people. I use it for me. And it just, yeah, I think from the first moment I saw this, I kind of fell in love with it. And it's very easy to connect to, I guess I'd say. It's easy to connect to, in that it feels like people, and it feels like a world where you're like, okay, yes, this is, I belong in here, I fit in here, I'm part of this world. These are all normal people that I know, and I can understand their emotional reactions to things because they're just like normal people that maybe I'm friends with, or maybe they're friends with my parents, or they're just people that I work with, or people that I know in life. It feels like a deck full of normal everyday people and emotions that make it speak very clearly. So the Anna K is a wonderful deck. Like I said, I use the shit out of it. Those are my top 5 most used decks from 2010 to 2019. So top 5, again, most used. There's a separate question for my actual like top 5 choices of the decade. So we'll get to that in another video. So for day 5, the question was, what has using the tarot taught you from 2010 to 2019 over the past decade? And I'd say it's taught me a lot. More than anything, I think what it has really taught me, and, you know, keep in mind too that I used tarot for years prior to 2010. So, I mean, I was like 7 years, I think, into my tarot reading experience when 2010 rolled around. So I've been using it for a while, but the more I've used it over the years and for, you know, for a longer period of time, I think the more it's taught me to trust in my intuition above all, to trust my gut, to trust that if I get a feeling about something, or I feel like I know something, that isn't crazy, you know, that there is something going on there. There's a method to the madness, and there's a reason to trust in myself, because oftentimes it turns out to be right, what that gut is saying. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that it's taught me. Question 6 for day 6 was, what decks are you anticipating in 2020 and why? Well, for starters, when I first got home at the beginning of January, awaiting me that had arrived while I was out of town was the Spacious Tarot, which I've already spent some time using, but I am absolutely as connected to it as I thought I was going to be. I was so excited to get that deck. It was one of the Kickstarters that I was just absolutely most looking forward to, that I had backed over the course of 2019, and is living up to my expectations so far. So I'm really loving the Spacious Tarot. So because I was looking forward to receiving it when I got home, which was in officially 2020, I'm going to include that on the list. I'm also really looking forward to the Mythical Creatures Tarot by Baba Studio, which I did pre-order, and I'm really looking forward to that one. I love their decks. I mean, it's one of those things where we're going to have to see how readable it is for me. I feel like it will probably be readable for me, but I also, just generally speaking, love Baba Studio's decks, and, you know, it's the kind of thing where I sort of feel like I might actually keep it as an art object, even if it doesn't turn out to be a big reader for me. I'm also really looking forward to Tarot of the Divine by Yoshi Yoshitani. That's one that I've seen a lot around Facebook, people posting images of it in some of the Facebook groups and things like that. And it's a just really cool illustration style. And again, a deck that uses a fairy tale for each card. And it looks really cool in a way where I haven't been quite as drawn to some other fairy tale decks, like the Baba Fairy Tale deck, or the fairy tale deck by Lisa Hunt. Just blanked on her name there for a second. And then finally, I just found out the other day that Baba Studio is planning a reprint of the Fantastic Menagerie, which I think is supposed to happen in 2020. I'm not sure, but they're planning a reprint of the Fantastic Menagerie. They're also doing a new edition of the Baroque Bohemian Cats. I don't know which, if any of those are coming out in 2020, but they are definitely like super anticipated by me. So got to include those here as well. Day 7, the question was, what tarot card stalked you in 2019? And the answer to that is the Knight of Cups, because the Knight of Cups stalks me all the time. It is my eternal #1 stalker card of all time. It comes up all the time to the point that I start to treat it as, you know, not just a message specifically about the meaning of the card, but sometimes it comes up as like a signal to me in some other way. You know, like there will be times when I will be doing a reading and it will feel something like really potent is happening. And then if I pull the card off the bottom of the deck, it's the Knight of Cups. And it's to the point that I kind of treat that as like a signal that this is something I should be paying attention to. Like, this is something that's specifically meant for me, and I should be recognizing that it's meant for me. Like, it's developed a whole sort of separate meaning for me aside from the normal meaning of the card. So yeah, so the Knight of Cups is my forever stalker. I love the Knight of Cups. I feel called out by the Knight of Cups all the time as well. And yeah, it's just always with me. So day 8, question 8 is, what tarot books did you read in 2019? So there are a few on my list here that I wanted to talk about. The first one that I wanted to talk about that I really enjoyed is Tarot Elements by Melissa Snova. This is a book, I really love her writing. Kitchen Table Tarot is like one of my most recommended beginner books. I think it's fantastic. And I really enjoyed this book a lot. You know, I will say that a lot of it is taken up with a sort of card by card guide to the tarot, which, you know, you kind of get something quite similar in Kitchen Table Tarot. So, you know, that is a chunk of it, but then the rest of it is based on different readings that you can do surrounding the elements. So it's basically readings that look into particular areas of your life, and I really liked it, and I did some of the readings and I thought they were very helpful, and so I really liked this one. So another one that I read in 2019 is Your Tarot Court by Ethany Dawn, and obviously Ethany is also the originator of 31 Days of Tarot, so big shout out to her, not just for this book, but also all of these wonderful video ideas. But I really enjoyed this book. You know, I think the court is something that's really challenging for a lot of people. And I still think that of all of the different elements of the deck, you know, the court cards are still the ones where, you know, it's always helpful for me to think of new ways to connect to the courts and to think about them and to incorporate them into readings when they come up, and sort of, I don't know, it's always good to think about the courts in a different way. And I thought that this book was really good. So I enjoyed that one a lot. Finally, I read this book, How to Deal Tarot for Everyday Life. This is by Sammy Main. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not sure. Illustrated by Marissa de la Peña. So this is the book that came in this set with the How to Deal Tarot kit, which was basically a reprint with some changed cards of the Circo Tarot, which was sold by Urban Outfitters. And I love the deck. I didn't have the Circo Tarot before, and then I got the How to Deal Tarot, which again is mostly the Circo Tarot. There are several cards that have been significantly changed, but for the most part, it is the Circo Tarot. Love the deck. Absolutely love the deck. Did not find this book super helpful, to be perfectly honest, because all of the card descriptions, first of all, they're very short, and they're also really generic, and there's nothing sort of connecting the meaning of the card to the specific artwork that gets used in the deck. And, you know, to me, if a guidebook's going to come with a deck, I want some discussion of what the actual artwork is, and rather than just a description that in some cases it felt like the description didn't even fully jive with the message that's being conveyed by the image in the deck. So it felt like a generically written book that then they put in the images from that particular deck, and it just like didn't go really. So I didn't find this book super helpful actually, but I did love the How to Deal deck, and I've used it this year and really liked it. I love the colors of it, and I love the artwork of it. So, you know, it was worth getting the kit, but not for the book. Let's just put it that way.